What's all the fighting about? Perhaps the better question is it worth it? Wisdom leads us to pick our battles very purposefully. Let's explore that question on this episode of the Educators Among Us podcast.
Welcome to the Educators Among Us podcast, where we share motivational messages and inspiring stories for and about educators. Your host, Scott Barron, is author of the critically acclaimed book, Love 'Em and Lead 'Em, and provides powerful insights and wisdom for those who heed the call to teach, coach, lead, and serve at all levels of education.
This is Scott Barron, and I'm honored to be your host for the Educators Among Us podcast. We just love pouring into the lives of those who serve in all levels and all roles of education. It's hard work because we get to be a part of the lives of people, and working in schools isn't just what's how we say raising students or educating students. It's a community endeavor. It's trying to work with parents and students and colleagues and others, and as we all are on that journey. Right? That journey of life and trying to find a better way forward and learn and grow. And of course, in that calling to grow, where we bump up against those challenges that take us outside of our comfort zone. It gets hard. It gets weird sometimes, even where we have to accept that, what we thought we knew, we don't know. And part of the pathway of education and learning is having some humility, right? To acknowledge that we don't know what we don't know. Right? And having that perspective, it makes a big difference. It makes a difference in how we learn and our ability to listen to other people and resolve the inevitable conflict. I like to say that schools are practically they're conflict factories. Right. I mean, there's just such it's designed when we put everybody together with all their backgrounds and sometimes their strengths, but also their weaknesses. And we pour all that into a school and a classroom and teams and other things. Are we going to have different perspectives and sometimes have to resolve those? Well, sure. That's part of that's part of growing up, right? Is being able to navigate through some of those points of disagreement and disputes, and that's what we want to look at today, right? Because life is full of conflict, and especially in school life, and so it's just in our nature. Right? It's just part of who we are, with even some being wildly committed to picking fights and instigating sides. It's us against them. Sometimes it's us against the world, right? But fights can be intriguing. we like, for example, if you go to a hockey match, fighting is celebrated. The crowd goes wild because they've thrown down their gloves and they're going at it, right? Even at the baseball game. Even at the baseball game, when the bench is empty and then you see the pitchers eventually making it, they've slogged in from the bullpen and they've made it to the area. Usually everything's over by then, right? By the time the pitchers get there, it's usually done. But there's still this intensity that comes into the crowd when they're fighting, and why is that? This idea of battles and, it's the conflict we know is part of the journey, but there's actually something that distinguishes the most effective educators. They have an ability to navigate those points of conflict in a very distinctive way, right? And so the question becomes, can we work through disputable matters without being disputable? Right? Without having a character and the habits of just being a disputable person. You know what I'm talking about. There's some people that just they just can't seem to not pick fights, and so that's what we want to consider today. I've got a great quote from Corrie ten Boom, right? Don't waste your strength fighting shadows. Save your courage for the battles that build the kingdom. And in this quote, it's a capital K kingdom, right? There's a bigger picture here. There's God's kingdom. There's the Creator. There's the bigger picture here. And sometimes we get caught up in the little K kingdom, right? The small things, the things that are more selfish and self-oriented, and we can lose perspective. But arguing in conflict, it gets old. It gets old fast, and it can so quickly degrade into just nastiness, right? Where we do form sides, and sometimes you don't know where the attack's going to come from. Throwing people under the bus, we say, or sometimes we're all looking out for ourselves, and it's not a great way to lead in a school setting, particularly. It's a part of life. It's a part of life everywhere, especially on social media, right? When we see just incredible words being said and people calling names and challenging integrity and even making just we'll say perverse statements, right? And that happens around education. We've experienced a lot of administrators and teachers that are dealing with some pretty difficult situations, and people who they thought were their friends and their colleagues have turned on each other. And boy, the pain and the stress that's coming from that is hard, right? Liquid courage may sometimes be an igniter. We've seen people who sometimes, they at night or other times, we've seen some pretty unprofessional, disrespectful messages be shared. And that keyboard, the power of that keyboard, it's enough to stimulate and to trigger foolish behavior. Really just foolish behavior expressed in destructive ways. And some people end up even making posts that cost them their career because it was just so out of line, and they took a position that if they could rewind, if they could pull it back. But unfortunately, with the internet and the way it's designed, there is no rewind. There is no taking it back. And that makes it even more significant of being wise with our tongue and our fingers, right? Wisdom teaches discretion, where we recognize that just because it can be done, just because it can be said, doesn't mean it should be, right? Just because we think it doesn't make it true. And especially just because it can be sent, just because it can be typed, doesn't mean it should be. Some battles, you see, they're not ours. They're not ours to fight. That's one for somebody else, and maybe even God. Many aren't even worth it. It's just not worth going down that path. It's not worth making that, as they say, a hill to die on. You will never reach your destination if you stop and throw stones at every dog that barks. That's Winston Churchill, right? If you take the time to be distracted and to try to fight back against everybody who's calling you names and saying things about you or trying to challenge your integrity or ... right? If you allow that to take away from your work and your purpose and your calling, it's going to be exhausting. You're going to use up all of your talents and your time and your energy in a waste. Imagine a school where disagreements actually fuel curiosity, where kind of using challenges like that, we convert those into opportunities for innovation, rather than fracturing relationships and destroying culture. Wouldn't that be something? Actually, isn't that what education should be in the first place? I mean, that's the kind of schools that we want our students to be able to explore, and us as educators in a respectful dialogue, and being open, being genuinely open to contrary opinions and thoughts, but still pursuing wisdom. Discernment in conflict enables us to choose what matters over what splatters. Okay? It enables us to choose what matters over what splatters. In other words, we can make a destructive mess of things that somebody else has to clean up because we don't consider the consequences of our actions. We forget about the larger body and ecosystem that we're a part of. We forget that our words matter and they actually create consequences for other people. Understanding timing, the ability to read the room. These are critical skills for every professional and especially professional educators. Why? Well, because wisdom keeps perspective. It reminds us of who we are. It reminds us of why we're here, of why we do this work, right? And wisdom knows when silence is preferred over argument. That's a distinct ability to know when to talk and when to shut up, right? It's part of growing up. Avoid foolish and ignorant disputes. This is what Paul said in 2 Timothy 2:23. Avoid foolish and ignorant disputes, knowing that they generate strife. Can you do it? Can you pick that fight? Can you say those words that you know are going to create a disturbance? Sure, you can. But should you? The test of wise educators isn't in their fight, but rather it's in their restraint and insight. Disputable matters, they can be disputable, allowing agreement to be beautiful, right? Disputable people, that's another matter that others want to avoid, so they scatter. Dogmatic authority in every debate. It degrades dialogue, and it shuts hard the gate on what should be a collaborative, humble pursuit to make us all more astute. Perfect clarity eludes all here on earth, and after all, people have greater worth. Just a way to remind us, right? Disputable matters exist. Disputable things that we don't have to have a dogmatic position on. There is truth, and there's some very important truth that we have to consider. But there's a lot more that we can talk about, that sometimes we can agree to disagree, and we can still love each other. We can still respect each other and sustain relationship with each other. So save your courage. Save your courage for the important battles this week, my friend, avoiding the distractions and the disputes that waste your many talents. I heard a sermon one time that said distractions are the destruction of your dreams in slow motion. Those distractions, especially those around disputable matters, they can destroy relationships and limit your influence. Wouldn't that be a shame? Yes. Yes, the answer is yes. We can navigate disputable matters without being disputable. And that is where we find the greatest wisdom. Hey, I really hope that your week this week you're able to see those moments, to not get too wrapped up in some of those points, but to still sustain your influence and your relationship with the people that are in your life, both personally and professionally. Because we, of course, have those disputable matters in our homes sometimes, and certainly in our classrooms and in our hallways and in our schools. And sometimes even while we're driving down the road, we kind of run into those things. Hey, you can handle it. Don't let it get to you, because you're bigger than that. You know how to handle these things. A coaching question to ask yourself at the end of each day: did I do my best to wisely engage with disputable matters today? Did I do my best to wisely engage with disputable matters today? Love him and lead him, my friend. This is Scott.
Thank you for joining us for the Educators Among Us podcast and for your courageous commitment to this noble calling. We get you and the challenges of this work. To stay connected with this community, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and weekly encouragement at educatorsamongus.com.